Gunmen stormed a hotel in the capital of the West African nation of Mali Friday morning. The attack came as the threat from the radical Islamic group ISIL was felt across the globe this week. In France, mourning continued for 130 people killed in the Paris terror attacks last Friday. Meanwhile, French authorities conducted a series of raids that included hunting down and killing the alleged ringleader. And a Chinese hostage was killed by ISIL, resulting in strong reaction from Beijing. While in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed to punish those responsible for the recent bombing by ISIL of a Russian jet in Egypt. And as refugees continue to flee the violence in Syria and Iraq, terror fears fueled a U.S. backlash against resettling the refugees in America. Joining me now is Laure Mandeville. She is the chief U.S. correspondent for Le Figaro. Also with us is Chen Weihua. He is chief Washington correspondent for the China Daily and deputy editor for China Daily News. And joining us from Philadelphia is Vladimir Golstein. He's an associate professor at Brown University. Here with us in the studio too is Afshin Molavi. He has written about the Middle East and the Muslim world while a reporter for Reuters and the Washington Post. He is now a non-resident fellow at Johns Hopkins University. Welcome to all of you to the show. Let's start in Mali. Gunmen took scores of people hostage. They have since been freed. But Laure, this is a country where France has been conducting operations against Islamic militants. So what do you make of this?
Well, I think it's clearly, another blow struck to the French and, of course, the Mali society and government. The French have been extremely active in Mali since 2013 to try to confront and push back on the Islamists who had been, trying to terrorize the population of Mali. The French have been quite efficient, actually, in pushing them back in some areas in the north, but the fact that the capital, Bamako, is being struck now, and a hotel where you had a lot of French, American, and other nationalities is a warning. It's a way to say, we're here, we're going to keep on striking you. And I think it's going to only strengthen the resolution of the French to go against ISIS.
Afshin, what do you make of it?
I think, Anand, this is, yet another symptom of this very dangerous moment I think we're facing in the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of sub-Saharan Africa as well, with the rise of radical Islamist groups. Now, in the case of Mali, some of what we're seeing is the aftermath of the Arab uprisings as weapons and jihadists began flowing from Libya into Mali. But I think this is really a dangerous moment. Obviously, the Paris terror attacks jolted so many people, but all across the region, people have been victims of these kind of terrorist attacks over the past year and a half. And I think the Paris terror attacks woke up in the Western world to this nature of these attacks, but these have been going on, and it's a very dangerous time.
Laura, just before we move on, I just want to ask you about this, because we're hearing this expression over and over again. It's a bit of a cliche, but this is now the new normal?
Well, I think it's a good question. I mean, as Afshin was saying, terrorism, Islamist terrorism in Africa has been going on for quite a while, and the French strategists and Western experts know that Africa is like a soft belly for terrorism because governments are weak, there is a lot of corruption, there is poverty, and there is this kind of very dangerous brand of Islam which is sort of spreading because you have Salafist, export from the Middle East into Africa. And I think this is very dangerous. The French have been, I would say, the only ones really, with a little bit of help of the Americans, trying to confront Islamist jihadism in the Sahel region, which has been particularly hit. But I think we're going to need, help, and that's why I think it's important to see that the French president has called on allies all over the world, but also in Europe, to do more. The other European countries, if they don't want to be struck in their turn, have to step up and to get involved in this fight.
Weihua, the Chinese have now been thrust front and center into this crisis. A Chinese hostage has been killed. What do we know about this, and how is Beijing likely to respond to this?
I think, now we see the pattern you just referred to. I mean, a week after the Russian jet bombing, there was an attack in Paris, and then a week later, then this Mali hotel incident. So there was Chinese there, but most people probably don't know. They think that France and Mali had a close relation, but actually China-Mali trade is bigger than France-Mali trade now, and a lot of Chinese companies are there, and the Chinese company weeks ago just won this bid for building a bridge in Mali capital, and they actually built a bridge years ago called China-Mali Friendship Bridge. So this is sort of most people remind many Chinese, terrorists, whether they're far away from their country, and it involves Chinese, lives. So I think the government and the people are asking how we should do a better job. The world should do a better job in protecting the lives, and the properties of Chinese overseas, including Africa and Mali. And the Chinese peacekeepers are there. So Chinese are helping, but this terrorism threat is very real now.
Vladimir, in the aftermath of the Paris attacks, there's been much talk of a coalition to take on Islamic State. Russia is playing a key role in that effort, and as we know, a Russian passenger jet was brought down, believed to be by a bomb, while over Egypt. Let's listen to what President Vladimir Putin had to say about this. Let's watch.
We will search for them everywhere, wherever they are hiding. We will find them in any spot on the planet, and we will punish them.
So, Vladimir, is Russia's involvement in this war against Islamic State about to get a lot bigger?
Yeah, I think it will get bigger, and it should get bigger, because I think the word was mentioned today during the discussion is a symptom. My feeling is this attacks is not a real disease, is a symptom of the disease. And the disease itself is rather misguided and old-fashioned Western, but mostly American foreign policy. This foreign policy kind of bet on challenging the regimes which United States doesn't like. And this challenge consists of this two-pronged approach. On the one hand, U.S. appeals to some kind of, very modernized, pro-Western, pro-European young crowd with iPhones who make the phone for pictures and go demonstrate, but they need muscle to change the regimes, and these muscles come from radicalized elements. I would call the whole thing like Bin Laden syndrome. That is, to get this muscle, they have to appeal to these radical elements. And Russia's been on the receiving end of this radicalism for a very long time. In Afghanistan, they were challenged by Bin Laden. In many other places, in Yugoslavia, there was a challenge by radicalized elements in Bosnia, which sort of split the country. So my feeling is that Russia's proof is a very quick study. They realized and understood this old-fashioned game, imperial game, by appealing to the elements which kind of, are not happy with the regime. Putin dealt with it in Chechnya. Putin confronted it in Ukraine, and now in Syria. And now I hope the world begins to see that this misguided policy of betting on radicalized, be it nationalists, be it religious sort of maniacs, is not a very good policy. It eventually comes and bites it, precisely like Bin Laden came and beat America, precisely like ISIS, which is supposed to be maybe a weapon to challenge secular regimes like in Syria or Iran. Now it's biting back Europe. So the whole policy should be overeaten because it's old-fashioned,
right.
Not working.
Okay. Laura, if we look at France, the country is still reeling from these attacks. It was only a week ago. People are still in a state of shock. The government has responded by carrying out military attacks against ISIS targets in Syria, but at home it's introduced, they've extended the emergency for one. There's talk now of constitutional amendments. There's talk about curtailing certain civil liberties, which the French have had for a very long time. How does the government balance that against the fact that it has to protect the French people, and how much of an issue is that in the country?
Well, I think there is really a change of mood in France. I mean, if you take what happened in January, you still had, especially on the left of the political spectrum, this idea that maybe in a way, because these caricatures, these cartoonists had been, too bold and offensive to Islam, maybe somehow they deserved. I mean, some people were sort of daring saying that, at that moment, and saying we have to be more careful, we have not to offend Islam. And actually this kind of speech was heard very much in the US as well. Now I think there is a different type of mood. The people have understood that for these radical Islamists, the enemy is the West, and it's Western civilization. They want to, they have declared 2 years ago in the ISIS journal, Dabiq, they talked about putting the flag of ISIS on top of the Vatican and on St. Peter Cathedral in Rome. They are enemies of the West. There is a hatred in this radical Islam, and that's what we have to fight. So the French people understand that we have to get tougher. And you must understand that, for instance, the state of emergency, people are welcoming it because they understand that to wage this war, we're going to have to indeed, infringe on some kind of our liberties. And for instance, there is now, I think, a support among the population for expelling radical imams that are not French or are binationals. If we realize they've been propagating ideas of hatred and supporting these terrorist networks, they're going to be expelled, and that will be supported with the majority of the population. Of course, the big challenge is going to be to remain wise in the policy which is implemented while being tough. And the huge mistake, of course, would be to give the impression that we are going to fight Muslims. The French
right.
Muslims are totally welcome and embraced at the moment by the French.
That's right.
You should know that in the streets, people are in solidarity. There've been people embracing each other in the street. Some women, there was this video of an old French lady who is 75, I think, who spoke out and said, we are going to fight these jihadists together with the 5 million Muslims who live in France, and we are all united in this fight. The question is, how is it going to evolve now? It will depend also on how successful this intelligence fight is as well. If you have other terror attacks, there will be, more and more radicalization on the native French side. You must understand that you have ultra-right parties as well, which is actually saying we have to defend ourselves more and more because we are at war and we are, under threat. So this is a battle for winning over the minds of the Muslim minority in Paris, in France.
Okay, Afshin, isn't that a risk here in the Western response that people, 1.1 billion people who follow the Muslim faith, are being conflated with a smaller group of people who are radicals who are carrying out acts of violence?
Sure, there is that risk, and particularly when people start talking about clash of civilizations and that sort of thing. I mean, I think when you look at the biography of the French-Belgian jihadists who took part in this attack, you look at someone like Abdelhamid Abaoud. We know the narrative of his biography because it's a familiar one. This is a man who grew up in Belgium, grew up in a marginalized, somewhat an alienated environment, but he grew up middle class. He had opportunities. He was admitted to an exclusive Catholic school. Now, the vast majority of those European Muslims who live in those marginalized, alienated environments, they don't turn to jihad, of course. He did, and many of the ones who end up engaging in these terrorist attacks do come from that similar background. But what he did is he did not represent a civilization. He represented a self-constructed identity. And his identity was jihadists fighting the Crusader West, right? But the vast majority of Muslims, as was noted here, are law-abiding. They work hard. They appreciate the opportunities they've been given in France. And so the danger is we can't conflate civilization with this perverted identity that was created by Abdelhamid Abaoud and a few others.
We will come back to this. We're going to take a break right now. More with our international panel on the global fallout from the terror attacks in Paris. When we return, you're watching The Heat.